live. Greetings, everyone, in another general election special here in Swindon, where myself, Martin Costello, is joined by Debbie Hicks. How are you, Debbie?
I'm really good today. How are you, Martin? You okay?
I'm very good. We've had another great week of campaigning, haven't we? That we'll probably pick
Yeah,
up on a bit
yeah.
later. We've been out meeting the general public. Everyone's been really happy to see us. Our leaflets have gone down well. So,
Yeah.
everything's going really good. And we're on target for hopefully some liberation on Independence Day. But talking,
Hopefully. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Talking of liberty, that's the topic we're going to talk about tonight. As
hmm
people know, Debbie was you were a very strong anti-lockdown campaigner, and that's really where we first met.
Yeah.
Through that, of course,
Yeah.
4 years ago, people will remember those harsh restrictions.
Mm.
But it seems now the incumbent MP in Swindon is talking about having people's slates wiped clean for these. Now let's just take a look at the article. I'm just going to pop it up. Hopefully it will pop up. Right, so the article, it states, and the Swindon Even Advertiser, with our good friend Alan Thomas, one of the local reporters, the headline reads, "Lockdown rule breakers should have slate wiped clean." And the chap there is Sir Robert Buckland, who I'm standing against in Swindon South. And he says fines and restrictions handed out to thousands of people during COVID-19 lockdowns shouldn't count against them when they're trying to find work. That's the view. He said the penalties were not intended to criminalise people forever and prevent them getting a job. Now,
Mm.
Debbie, what are your views on this?
Yeah, there's 2 points to this. Obviously, I'm completely in agreement with the idea that the COVID fines, there were so many of them. I haven't got the figure in front of me. There were so many, from the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, you had the case of the two ladies that were having a coffee in a field. Do you remember that were dragged off by the police?
Yeah.
To people that were caught, I don't know, with one person in their garden going out of the rule of six or whatever it was, I forget now, to obviously people like myself that were protesting and yourself that were protesting, peacefully protesting, I must add as well, against the lockdown. So all these fines were absolutely ridiculous. They were a burden on the police, actually, I think, to have to deal with such things like breaking up granny from children and stuff like that, or dealing with ladies having coffees, to having to police large numbers of peaceful protests in a very violent way, which they did in London as well. And for me, I went to the very first anti-lockdown rally, which there was about, I don't know, 300 people there in Hyde Park in early May 2020. And I was told to go, and I refused to go because I felt I had a lawful right to be there, and I still felt I had a lawful right to be there. And I was issued a fine. And when it came through the post eventually, which apparently other people didn't get the fines through the post, but I did, I refused to pay it. And they kept contacting me. And in the end, it was taken to a magistrate's court. And by that time, I'd been charged with other things for protesting as well. I challenged it in the magistrate's court. And I was actually, the trial was in Westminster, and City of London magistrates that went to two courts, and they brought in, this was actually quite astonishing, the judge that did Julian Assange, which I didn't even realise on the day. And when I looked at him, I was absolutely astonished. So this is the guy they reel out for activists that they don't like. And it was absolutely diabolical, my trial in that court that day. The people listening that may have been there, because I had lots of people come along to support me. He was absolutely vicious. He was rude. He was nasty. He tried to throw some of the people in the public gallery into the cells for talking. He even upset my lawyer, who's incredibly polite. It was diabolical, and he actually tried to listen to those people. He actually tried to forge my forms in front of the whole court, which is why I took it to the High Court, to say that I earned, I can't remember what he put down now, I earned £30,000, and that's why I had to pay a fine in court for avoiding paying the original COVID fine. So anyway, it took me about 18 months to get it to the High Court. That was a real battle. And unbelievably, the High Court upheld this conviction because it's one big club, isn't it, Martin?
Exactly. Yeah, they make the laws.
So this is a topic very close to my heart. It really is. It means a lot to me that, in principle, I agree with Robert Buckland. But let's be honest, Robert Buckland is only doing this to cover his own backside. And also because, obviously, his colleagues, Boris Johnson and all the rest of them that were partying during lockdown. And we've seen those videos of him partying. We've all seen them.
Matt Hancock had his tongue down some woman's throat, didn't he?
And yeah, exactly. Matt Hancock having an affair with a lady during lockdown. They were all at it, weren't they? They were all breaching the rules. Yeah. And we have to have a proper discussion about this from this article in the Advertiser, because I think there's two questions the public need to think about. Is firstly, why did those ministers who had the top advice from the top scientific advisors, medical advisors, why did they think it was safe to gather at a party when they were telling the rest of us it's not safe for you to gather in more than groups of, I don't know what it was, 6, or you're not allowed to go out of your house, you're not allowed to go anywhere? Why?
Yeah.
So I'll put that back to you. What do you think? I mean, why did they do?
I mean, it was just bizarre, wasn't it? The whole thing from start to finish. But when you think about, 4 years ago, all the abuse that we received just for standing up for our basic rights, it was absolute awful. We was called all sorts of nasty names. We were just, all we were doing was just asking basic questions because none of it made sense. All these groups and things. I mean, one of the big triggers for me, really, I think, was when we were told to be, we can't go out of our houses, and they're flying 15,000 people a day into the country. I mean, how it just made a mockery of the whole thing. And what you're saying about Buckland is quite true. He's absolutely covering his backside. I'm going to bring up an article now, actually, because we're talking about fines. Now, there's a hairdresser in Swindon by the Magic Roundabout called Guy's Barbers. And this chap was fined £6,000 for failing to close down over that.
Absolutely
period.
Disgusting.
It was absolutely disgusting, because I remember when it first came out, I made a comment on the Swindon Advertiser Facebook page, and he was getting loads of positive reactions because I was saying do not pay it, and then they removed the article completely off of there. And that leads us on to censorship over that whole period as well. I was deplatformed from Facebook, merely just for asking questions, no other reason. And it was a really, really frightening time, the powers they used and exerted just to silence and censor us or make us look crazy. Yeah, yes. And they talk about, let's follow the science. We were following the science. We was asking questions, simple ones. And now we've got all this data. Why can't we bring all this data together, then try to understand it? Because surely that's what science is.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, 100%. And I hope now, in the cold light of day, 3 years later, and I've been reading the Swindon Advertiser article, and I can see people are making lots of very intelligent and logical points about what really happened, because I think there was so much fear. And I think it was more fear than anything, because I remember speaking to people during lockdown that had masks on, because I never wore a mask, and obviously campaigned hard against all of it. And most of the people I spoke to didn't actually want to wear the mask. They were scared. When I actually had those very honest conversations, I remember having a conversation with an older lady in Oxford, because I did quite a lot in Oxford. I was all over the place. And she was stood, I was on a megaphone, she was stood listening, and she said to me, she stood, oh God, I've got to take this off. I can't deal with it. I said, look, just take it off. If you can't breathe, take it off. And she, what she said to me? I'm so scared. They're gonna come for me. They're gonna arrest me. And I felt so sorry for her. And I just put my hand around her shoulder. I said, for goodness sake, if you can't breathe. And that was mirrored in all the conversations I had with people that actually agreed that it was crazy and it was wrong, but were so scared. And I hope now, in the cold light of day, people can look back and see how illogical, how irrational it all was, how damaging it all was, not just on a psychological level, because obviously masking up small children, children of all ages, and making them wear them, locking up our grandparents in elderly people's home where we can't see them for the whole duration of the lockdown, saying that we can't see our families unless it's in groups of 6, we can't go out unless it's for a walk or exercise. The whole thing and what that did to people psychologically. And I think there's research now that's showing this is having a huge effect on children. They're calling them the lockdown generation, aren't they? That's the term that's being used. Not only that, Martin, but the physical health, which is why I filmed that hospital. The impact it's had on people's physical health that couldn't get the treatment they needed, urgent treatment, whether it was for their heart, cancer, other debilitating conditions, that, of course, as you know, sometimes small things that they're dealt with don't turn into big things that cost too much money and time for the NHS. But if they're not, which is why we're seeing these problems now, it's one of the big reasons, then it has a huge impact on our health service. And is it just me, Martin, who is talking about this in this election? Nobody.
No.
That is the big elephant in the room, is lockdown and what it's done to us all. Not only health, the economy, it's wrecked the economy, it's wrecked our children's mental health, their educational well-being. It's wrecked our families. How many families were torn apart because of lockdown?
Yeah, exactly.
Families that were at war with each other because they disagreed or they didn't want to see each other. It's even affected my family. My niece absolutely hates me because of my anti-lockdown activism. It's divided us up so much, and all of a sudden it's like the election's here and it's like it never happened. Exactly. It didn't happen. Let's not talk about it. And we have to talk about it. We have to.
No, you're absolutely right, and we've got to beat that drum, because what they did to us over those 4 years ago should never be forgotten. They stripped us of so many freedoms. They pushed all these emergency laws through that they can use at a later date. And like you said, though, the consequences of the virus are far worse than the virus itself. And what we've seen, like you said, is people weren't getting treatment. And of course, then they wonder why there's a massive NHS backlog appeared. You know, people not getting cancer treatments and all these different things. We've got to make sure this never happens again, and we can't just brush it under the carpet like it never happened. We need to have discussions about this, because
we do.
The depths that they went to. I mean, they weren't even following scientific advice. They had like a advisory group, SAGE, that were psychologists, I believe, and they were collecting a lot of data about people's behaviours and things over that time. You know, they're quite happy to, in my opinion, it was preparing people for perhaps going into like another cashless society, moving people onto a universal basic income, so they can get food delivered to them. Everyone got into that. Things like Zoom, working from home, or rocketed. It was a transition period, so it was a drill for something more than what's to come, because there was absolutely no other logic behind it. And those brave people that were, you know, going out marching, like in London, you wouldn't see this on the mainstream media, but there were God knows how many, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, normal people of all colours, races, women and children.
From every background. And they didn't want to talk about that. And the left, we were talking about politics, because obviously we keep talking about our backgrounds, what we come from, and I was from a more left, Labour, whatever background. You know, absolutely, I think they absolutely hated that, actually, Martin, that you had lots of really working class people, lots of black kids, lots of, you know, from rundown communities in London that were out with us. And it's like, I think there was a frustration that this was a movement at that time and a march of the people. It really was like we'd never seen before in this country, because you've seen some of these rallies, and I'm not necessarily against some of these issues, but they're very much very middle class people that go out and campaign. They don't represent real people, but that did at that time. And I think it scared the establishment. It's like, oh God,
big time.
They're coming together. You know, it's so and of course that's why I didn't cover it. I think the BBC said there was 10,000 people.
Oh gosh, I don't know
in
who's doing the
London.
counting for them, but I've never seen so many people in one place, and it was a beautiful moment actually in humanity. The warmth and love there. But as we're actually talking about Labour, this article here now is it's Keir Starmer. As you may know, he came to visit Swindon last week. You may have seen me try to get him, but he ran away. But now he's saying there's a COVID amnesty suggestion derided by Keir Starmer. So the article goes on to say here, the convictions. Oh, he's talking about Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, saying that they're breaking the rules of COVID, and these should all stay in force. So suddenly he's talking about COVID again. But it's interesting actually because Labour said that the lockdowns didn't go far enough either. They wanted longer lockdowns, which was very concerning. But what did you think about that article?
What, the article in the Advertiser?
Yeah, about Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I think Starmer's obviously trying to score points on this by attacking the Tories on it. And while it is hypocrisy of the Tories completely to have locked us all up, told us we can't do this, otherwise the police are going to come and arrest you or slap COVID fines on you. Of course, it's hypocrisy, but as I said at the beginning, we need to ask the question. And actually, if I remember, I'm sure someone listening will be able to fill in the gaps. If I remember, wasn't it Keir Starmer or maybe Sadiq Khan or both of them that were caught having some kind of gathering as well? I'm pretty sure Keir Starmer, there was a Labour gathering, and there was pictures somebody had taken in somebody's sitting room or kitchen, and they were all drinking, and there's a whole load of them during the lockdown. So they were all at it. And I remember, because I helped out in London during the mayoral elections in 2021, which was very controlled, very, very controlled. I remember somebody telling us that Sadiq Khan was having a private political meeting with local people in a cafe in North London. So they were all going against the rules. And we have to ask ourselves, as people in that article, when I looked at the comments earlier, quite rightly calling out, why did they feel it was so safe for them? If this was supposed to be according to mainstream media, and I'm sorry, Swindon Advertiser, you were part of that as well if you're listening. Why is it according to mainstream media this virus was so dangerous and it was so deadly, and I'm going to come to that point in a minute because it wasn't, that none of us could do anything, but these people were so confident it wasn't? And the reason is, no, it's not because they're stupid, and it's not because they're stupid, it's not because they were so arrogant, it was the fact that they'd seen the proper science and the proper advice from the top advisors that actually COVID, which was out there right from the beginning on the government website, Martin. I don't know if you remember, I remember screenshotting it for that reason.
Yeah, I can dig it out and I'll put it onto this video.
I can find it. You can. I might still have it because I have still got that phone. In March 2020, the Department of Health, and it was on the government website, put out a notice to say that COVID was what they called a non-HCID, which is a non-high consequence infectious disease. So it's infectious, highly infectious, but loads of things are highly infectious, like colds and flu. Anyway, it was a highly infectious, but it was not deadly at all for the vast majority of the population.
And that was a week before lockdowns. They put that out as well. That's what they actually the Department of Health put that out a week before lockdown, before we was even locked down at all. But even in those press briefings, though, even Chris Whitty said, though, that the vast majority of people, it's nothing to be worried about.
Most people, a significant proportion of people will not get this virus at all, at any point in the epidemic, which is going to go on for a long period of time. Of those who do, some of them will get the virus without even knowing it. They will have the virus with no symptoms at all, asymptomatic carriage, and we know that happens. Of those who get symptoms, the great majority, probably 80%, will have a mild or moderate disease. Might be bad enough for them to have to go to bed for a few days, not bad enough for them to have to go to the doctor. An unfortunate minority will have to go as far as hospital, but the majority of those will just need oxygen and will then leave hospital. And then a minority of those will end up having to go to severe and critical care, and some of those, sadly, will die. But that's a minority. It's 1% or possibly even less than 1% overall. And even in the highest risk group, this is significantly less than 20%, i.e. the great majority of people, even the very highest groups, if they catch this virus, will not die.
And it's like no one listened to it. He was there telling it to people, and it didn't sink in with anyone. People were just too fixated on these stats going up of how many deaths a day, but they weren't looking at the small print either at the bottom, and the doctors were putting COVID on all death certificates just to because they couldn't actually prove or say they had COVID or not, so they'd say died with COVID even though they couldn't really prove that it was. There were so many bad things.
It was what the term I've been seeing a lot on social media lately, which I think really well describes it. It was a PCR-demic, in the sense of the PCR test, which I'm sure you know, is only about 7% reliable. And I think it was the guy that created it who died mysteriously, strangely enough, called Carrie. That's it. Who actually said this should not be used because it doesn't work and it will pick up on anything and say someone's positive. So you have the whole healthcare professionals, everybody in the workplace taking all these tests that were coming up as false positives. So you had the complete fear mongering of the national press every day putting up these figures that were going up and up and up and up and up that terrified the hell out of people. And the reality was a lot of those people, especially if they ended up in A&E or they thought they had COVID, would be diagnosed with something they didn't actually have. And then, of course, it's like any human being, isn't it? It becomes what they call psychosomatic, which no one talks about. If you think you're really ill with something, you're going to start feeling ill.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're told, oh, you've got this deadly virus, even though you might just have a little sniffle because you've got, I don't know, a bit cold or something, you are going to think you're going to be scared.
No, exactly.
And I just think it was a horrible psychological warfare against people.
There was psychological warfare. You've hit the nail on the head there. The other thing about Swindon as well, actually, our group, we put a freedom of information request in to Great Western Hospital, and we asked how many people died directly from the virus, and the answer come back in. This is for the whole of Swindon. 0. Nobody died directly from the virus. That is a fact. That's an absolute fact.
Yeah.
Now, what we did also...
So without them using the PCR thing, they're just telling you...
Yeah. Well, there were suggestions of medical fraud as well, because when they were running them through the testing, they were running them at 40 revolutions or something, so you were most likely to start getting false positives. So there were suggestions of medical fraud as well. But 3 years ago, actually, and this is where our independent journey began, people may remember in Swindon that we formed an independence alliance, and we put an independent candidate in every single seat in Swindon, 22 of them, to rebel against the lockdowns that were happening. And we used it as a platform to get the message out. And I'm really hoping Swindon remembers that and embraces it, because we were there on the front line fighting for your freedom,
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing it for. We're doing it for you and your kids. And that's why we care about you, Swindon, and that's why we're standing up again against the establishment.
Absolutely, and we're saying to people in Swindon, because obviously, I'm just going to be honest here. I don't know what the article is going to contain, but I had an interview with the advertiser today. I'm sure the article will be fine, but a lot of the focus was about my anti-lockdown activism, and while I didn't avoid that and I talked about it, I think, if you're reading smears or silly comments, and there are some silly comments that we're reading on social media, and we tend not to respond to them, Martin, because sometimes it's not worth getting into those silly kind of conversations. But what I would say to people that are listening to this, and in response to that advertiser article, is let's just think about that term conspiracy theorist. It's levelled at both of us a lot. Let's just think, what does conspiracy mean? Conspiracy, the word conspiracy means that you're being lied to, and that things are being decided in streak behind your back that are not in your interest. Why is that so hard to get our heads around, that politicians do that? Why on earth? Because let's think about that logically. We have all the proof on the table that they constantly lie to us. They lie to us about our public services. They lie about the NHS. They lie about where the money's going on. They lie about what wars are really about and who starts them. Everything is a lie. Why is it so hard to believe, you know, when people like us are saying things are alike, and when we say that the lockdown was a scam, it was a huge money-making scam, which it was. I mean, we talked about the PPE, personal protective equipment contracts that went out.
Track and trace.
I think it was 16 billion for that equipment to not even be used, because they didn't need to use it. It ended up in the bin, most of it.
Yeah.
And then you look into the COVID passport contracts that, thankfully, thanks to people like us, didn't happen, because that was a huge attack, and that was going to be permanent. A huge attack on our freedom to live in society. Around. And that was, I think, going into the billions. The contracts that were
30 billion, that's what they spent on track and trace, 30 billion. So
30 billion, exactly. And that was before and that was before the contracts for the COVID passports came in. So when we say, why are we so mad, and why is this such a slur of a word when actually it's the way of the world, and what politics is a conspiracy, that we were asking all these questions before the PPE stuff came out? We were saying it was a big money-making scam. We were saying that people had their snouts in the trough and were making money. With the pharmaceutical companies were milking the NHS to administer, and we need to be honest about this. I was never an anti-vaxxer. I've had that label slapped on me by the press. But what we were trying to warn people of is that if you're going to rush through a new whatever we want to call it, therapy or product, if you're going to rush it through without proper long-term adequate testing, you're going to have a problem. That's what we were saying to people, and sadly we didn't want to be proven right. We've been proven right when it's ended up in the High Court with AstraZeneca admitting that people have died of heart attacks and heart problems because of they've been. So, conspiracy theorist, if you want to call me that, I call it telling the truth theorist.
Yeah, conspiracy factualist. But, Swindon, we will fight for you as well to get justice for this. We're not going to let this go. This must never, ever happen again. This should be investigated fully. And there should be people put in jail, to be honest, for what's happened. And if you look at all the other Western countries, all running in lockstep as well, all behaving exactly the same way, all these Western nations, and there's also other countries that are not so connected, like us, with certain globalist corporations that weren't, they kind of missed all these restrictions, lockdowns and things. So, but I am pleased because a lot of people are waking up though now, so I think that was a great pivotal point actually in humanity, because then people realise that the mainstream media is so deceitful, so it woke a lot of people up. Well,
Absolutely.
I think we should probably wrap up there. The campaign, like I say, is going well. If anyone can help us out, whatever, please get in touch, or if you've got any concerns or any questions, just honestly, please reach out to us, because that's what we're there for as well. Like I said, we're fighting for you. And any last thoughts, Debbie?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if there are any voters that listen to this video, and what I would ask you is all the parties that are putting themselves up in Swindon around the country, and let's be really frank about this, you've got the Tories and the Labour, they've gun-ho for this lockdown, and all what it's done to everything for us, our families, our jobs, our businesses, our health, our children, what it's actually done. And they're asking for your vote again, and they don't even want to talk about this. And then you've got, and I'm sorry, I'm going to call out Reform, because Reform are now taking this position of being, and they were anti-lockdown, against all this. But we have to remind people, I'm sorry, I remember, because it was such a horrible, scary time. I remember who was there and who wasn't. And I also remember who closed ranks in the establishment, which was all of them, wasn't it, really? It was all of them. And Nigel Farage and Richard Tice closed ranks. And they were with the establishment in pushing the lockdown, pushing these pharmaceuticals, pushing, all of it. And I think what I would say to people is, remember who put themselves on the line. I mean, I lost my job over it at the time, and I had to move house. And I'm sure you've suffered as well. We put ourselves on the line because we felt so strongly that this was wrong, so wrong, and so worrying for the future. So please remember that, Swindon. We will be there again for you if it happens again. And we are going into, it looks like we're going to go into war restrictions. I really hope I'm wrong, but if we do, it's going to be very similar, and we will be there again for you. Will they be there? No.
but we certainly will be. Anyway, thank you very much, Debbie. And
thank you, Martin. Really interesting conversation, and we need to talk about this because no one wants to talk about it. No.
Exactly. Take care.
Okay, bye. Bye.